In this video, I'll be sharing my complete philosophy on building big pecs naturally. So if you're tired of gimmicks, want something that'll actually get you gains in the long term, this is the video you've been waiting for. But here's the disclaimer. My standards are extremely high, and it will require a tremendous amount of effort and long-term consistency while learning more about proper programming. So if you're not afraid of grinding, let's get started. So, the first and most important feature of this philosophy is striving to increase your bench press. Yes, the old school exercise that will never leave us because it is so freaking effective. It's not overrated. Guys who say that are often weak little always looking for the optimal exercise. They spin their wheels constantly, arguing back and forth with their peers. Yeah, you don't have to get stronger to get bigger. Follow juice heads, program hop, wonder why they don't have gains. I'll tell you why. Your numbers are far too low. Now, this does not mean you need to train like a competitive powerlifter or run any powerlifting program. That is not my advice. I will, however, suggest that when using bodybuilding rep ranges, so something as simple as 3 sets of 10 at 70%, you must induce progressive overload. Final. So let me simplify it like this. You have various strength standard charts on the internet that define you as novice, intermediate, advanced, elite. Arbitrary, of course, but many have hit those numbers and we have a general idea of what's possible. Now, when you go from one stage to the next, this will typically be correlated with increased muscle size. Not 1-to-1, but it's tight. No one's chest gets smaller from adding 50 pounds to their bench. In my case, going from a low 300s bencher to high, even hitting 405, resulted in massive pec gains. Never have my pecs been this big at this body weight. I didn't run a bodybuilding program. 0 machines were used. In fact, I don't even have access to heavy dumbbells. All I had to do was focus on basic bilateral presses. Of course, we rotate the variations, which I'll discuss later, but the point remains, this doesn't have to be complicated. What I want to talk about now is not only raising your absolute strength, but chasing rep PRs. That's really what matters. I found that every time you add 25 to 50 pounds to a 3x10, your pecs get bigger. It's that simple. So if you're doing a plate and a half on the bench, 3x10, raise it to 2, you'll see it in your pecs. If you take it from 2 plates to 250, it shows. Then you get 250 to 275, more improvements are made. And the next level is actually getting 300 to 315. But by that point, you're already a super elite bencher. So what am I actually suggesting? Just get your bench to the mid 200s for rep work, because that'll typically ensure a big 1 rep max without even training for that, though with specific strategies you can actualize your potential. So in a way, yes, my standards are high, but they're still realistic. Makes sense, get stronger emphasizing moderate rep ranges and take your current classification to the next one. Now I can already hear some people complaining that the bench press isn't optimal from a biomechanics standpoint. You are unable to fully adduct your humerus. So you would need a converging type of motion like a dumbbell chest press or even favoring a machine. And certainly those are valid points, but when you investigate it a little bit more, there are some contradictions. For example, these same people will state that stability is extremely important for hypertrophy. I think we can all agree on that. Now, in what world does the bench press not fit this criteria? I would actually argue it's the most stable free weighted press of all time. Hence, the incredible loading potential and why it's a competition movement that does not alter your form as you get progressively stronger, unless you're mastering the skill that much more. Sure, it's not a machine where the stability demands are that much lower, but many of us want to get stronger and have carryover to other presses. And when comparing the stability requirements to dumbbell press, it's vastly different. For the simple reason that as you get stronger at dumbbell movements, the size of the implements increase. So what's more stable, benching 275 or dumbbell press in the 130s? Anyone who's done both already knows the answer. Secondly, these same people will talk about lengthened partials being extremely effective, yet they complain about the final range of motion right here, which is degrees of range of motion, as if not getting this invalidates the movement, even though you have more loading potential. Can't we say that balances things out? Which we also see with some EMG research. Just to say, you got lots of guys who do barbell only training, never had a problem building up the chest, and some don't even lock out their elbow, so they're getting even less of humeral adduction. They're getting a slight bend in, trying to get that TUT in. So what really matters the most is the bottom position, not the top, okay? And if you actually did want to emphasize that squeezing motion, well, the best way is by changing the direction of resistance, such that it's sideways or somewhat diagonal. This way, we can actually bring the arm across the body under load. So we're training the shortened position right here. And for that, I actually like to use gymnastic rings. The rings turned out position will do that perfectly, as well as doing ring flies. Now, if you don't want to do that, a simple cable chest fly or machine will do that for you, but that doesn't have to be emphasized. It can always be done at the end of the program. Remember, we don't want to live in black and white thinking. So how about we talk about some of these secondary movements? If you're familiar with my work, you'll know I'm a big believer of the weighted stretch. I talked about this before the research on humans came out. In the past, we had unethical research on birds who were stretched to the absolute max and got jacked in the process. Of course, this intrigued me, and I started experimenting with that for yoke training. But the truth is, it can really be applied to any muscle group that has a stretching component. Now, the chest, obviously, there's an increased injury risk if you do try to overload. So don't load up 500 pounds on the bench and say, oh, way to stretch, bro, and then you tear your pec. That's not what I'm suggesting, but you could emphasize movements that train the lengthened position, the stretch, or simply get you a little bit deeper than your normal bench press. So weighted dips tend to be especially beneficial since we can maximally stretch the pecs. And that's why I argued in the past, it might even be better than the bench press for hypertrophy. That said, there's a tremendous con, which is it's harder on recovery, specifically the shoulders. And some people literally cannot do dips. They get tremendous sternum pain. It's important to exercise that fit our physiology. So provided that you can load the dip safely and effectively, freaking go for it. You will not regret it. My best was 5 plates, and I noticed carryover to the bench because I got such great numbers on it. And for hypertrophy work, it's especially beneficial. Like if you're doing between 2 and 3 plates for reps of 10 to 15, you're not going to have a small chest. It's pretty much impossible unless you're an extreme lightweight. In that case, you just got to gain some freaking weight, man. Don't blame the exercise if you are the problem. Now, if you can't do dips, but you're like, Alex, I want to get that maximum stretch, the next best thing is the weighted push-up, which I also made a video on. But you'll want to do these off a deficit because the floor limits you to the same range of motion as a regular bench press, which actually gives you great carryover, and you should do them to raise it. But to really get you in that deep position, you'll want to elevate yourself by either doing push-ups with dip bars on a rack with the feet elevated behind you or with plyometric boxes. And what's great about these is that you don't have to buy a cambered bar. That is very expensive, takes space, and most gyms don't have it. Well, with this, you can get the exact hypertrophy benefits, zero compromise. In fact, it might even be superior since it'll feed into your other push-ups more while being easier on the shoulders because you get a better natural scapular movement. Not that you can't do this on a bench, but let's keep it real. It is harder to do so for some weird reason. So in this way, it's easy recovery, but also maximum stimulus, getting more or less weight to stretch, all right? And the final exercise is going to be a dumbbell press fly hybrid. So instead of having your arms caved in this way, which is going to put more pressure on the triceps, or doing those half reps that's so common, you want to come out like a fly and then press. Or just get stronger at your regular dumbbell benching, but please use a freaking full range of motion. I'm tired of seeing all these half reps. It pisses me off. A lot of people get injured and shoulder pain doing that shit. It's straight up ego lifting. Get as deep as possible, okay? While staying tight, of course. Use what works for your build. And if that requires you to use a neutral grip, so be it. All right, so good goal is doing the hundreds for reps of 10 to 15. I think that's very realistic. In addition, when I talk about the bench, this implies using a certain type of form. Pausing at the bottom. Yeah, 80% of your training should be pause. And for me, I've made the switch completely. I don't do any touch and go on the flat barbell bench press. For other exercises, I might, like a push-up, dumbbell bench, overhead press, etc., but not the comp bench, and certainly not the variations that those entail. In fact, I might even exaggerate the pause where I'm doing 3-second holds down here. That'll really challenge your pecs and force them to re-explode from nothingness. This is how raw, natty powerlifters get their chest gains up, even though their training is oftentimes really minimalistic and not ideal for chest hypertrophy necessarily. But you look at the elites, they take their shirt off, they pretty much all have watermelon pecs. And one guy I can reference who also has really good content is Matt Venna. He made a video talking about, do you even lift status for powerlifters? People were calling him out, saying, oh, you look small. But then he takes the shirt off and shows the muscles that powerlifting emphasizes, and you can see they're just as developed as many bodybuilders. Just to say, he had enormous pecs and super thick spinal erectors and jacked legs. I believe they were 28.5 inches.
If you ask me, I would say I have some decent mommy milkers.
That says a lot, and he is not the exception. This is, in fact, the norm. So learn from powerlifters. I guarantee if they were to compete in a bodybuilding competition, the chest would not be the weak point. All right, the pause bench is the biggest game changer. You all need to incorporate it. And then finally, for upper chest, I'll first mention it's very hard to develop as a natural, but if you give it a really long time, it will thicken up. And what I'll say is, in an ideal program, you should be pressing from different angles for one reason only. It minimizes overuse injuries. But in that process, you're also going to bias different parts of the chest. So if you're strong at all the presses, whether it be completely flat or a decline or a slight incline, whatever, the whole chest should be developed, is what I'm saying, including upper. And when you do overhead pressing, this actually does work your upper chest. And I think that's been the main contributor to my development because I don't really do a lot of incline pressing. But if I am, I'll state this. It'll typically be with a closer grip, tucking the elbows, and not exceeding a 30-degree position. In a lot of commercial gyms, the bench is set way too high, which is putting a lot more pressure on the delts. Now, you might point out that's a contradiction to what I just said about the OHP, but keep in mind, just because that's how I did it doesn't mean it's superior or optimal. A low incline bench is going to be the best route, which can be done with a barbell and dumbbell. Or you can try something that is even better, in my opinion. I actually prefer this, a decline weighted push-up, because these really allow you to get more or less weight, and they feel so much better on the shoulders. So it doesn't really matter if it's free weight or calisthenics. It all comes down to the angles, which you can bias from a lot of different exercises. And regarding strength standards for the incline bench, I'm just going to say bluntly, anywhere between 275 and 315 is a good bet. But keep in mind, I'm talking about the low angles. Don't think there's some freak feat of strength. It'll obviously be less than your flat, but maybe by around 50 pounds or so, all depending on your muscular weaknesses and leverages. All I'll say is, get your incline bench to 225 for 3 sets of 10, and you should have some rock solid upper chest development. So really, the main message of today's video is, get strong at the basics. Nothing I said today was complicated. It's all full range of motion, difficult exercises that have stood the test of time. That's it. And when you trust this process in the long term, you'll just get bigger over the years. That's exactly what happened to me and with many of my subscribers who never stopped. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now I want to know your feedback about getting a bigger chest naturally. Let's hear it, and I'll talk to you all next time.